Anthony, are we ready to get started?
Give me 1 second.
I will.
Okay.
I think so.
And we'll wait
No
till Will's
problem.
ready.
All right. We'll figure this out. Anthony and Felice, you guys ready to get started?
Yes. Anthony, you want to kick it off?
Anthony appears to be muted. He also was freezing earlier.
Okay.
I don't see him.
I think he signed off and signed right back in. So why don't we just wait a minute and then we can get started.
Okay. Would you like me to give the spiel about?
That would be great.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. You'll notice right now, if this is one of your first times joining us, the way we conduct our virtual committee meetings is everybody is muted throughout the duration of the meeting, except for our co-chairs, Felice and Anthony, when he gets signed back on, and our presenters. Following the presentation and as we move through the agenda, the co-chairs will call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon on your screen and pressing the raise hand button. It's not the wave or the thumbs up, those will disappear. Only press the raise hand button once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling in from the phone, it is *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute whenever you're called upon. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once one of the co-chairs calls on you. If you're having problems, the chat is available for technical support to help with Zoom software problems. It is not to ask questions of the presenters or the co-chairs. They will never see those chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you may need to go to the participants section where you'll find the raise hand feature there. And finally, we encourage you not to raise your actual hand or wave at the screen to get our attention. If you're having problems, chat me, I'm here for support. And with that, we can hand it over to Felice. And I saw Anthony. Anthony's here and you guys can keep going.
Terrific, thanks, Will. Anthony, are you ready to kick it off? I think Anthony is having.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
Okay. I think Anthony's having some connectivity issues, so I'd just like to welcome everybody tonight. I'm Felice Farber, and I'm co-chairing the task force with Anthony Cohn. And tonight, we'd like to welcome MSK back again. We appreciate your participation in all of the task force meetings. And I'd like to turn it over to you for your presentation tonight. Dr. Kevin?
Can we have our slides up? Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to join you all again to discuss the Pavilion project at Memorial. Here we go.
No, let's kill that.
But first, the evening news.
That would be on. That might be on. Yeah, I think if you click out of it, that's like the most start. I think if you click a blue area, maybe. Give us one second, please.
I believe if you click on the thing next to the gear, there you go. Now it's working.
Oh. No.
There we go. All right. Apologies. For those who are joining us for the first time, my name is Jeff Drebin. I'm the chair of the Department of Surgery, and I'm also the acting hospital president at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, where I oversee our doctors, nurses, and researchers delivering the very best cancer care in the world. This meeting is part of a series that we planned with Anthony, Felice, Russell, and Will to discuss every facet of the Pavilion project. Next slide. At our previous meeting nearly 1 month ago, we shared details on the environmental review process, sustainability, housing, traffic, and transportation. We appreciated the thorough conversation and thank you for your thoughtful questions that evening. Tonight, we want to discuss the measures we'll put into place to minimize the impact of construction on our neighbors and our patients. Next slide. Before we dive into the presentation, I want to take a moment to share a statistic for those who may be joining us for the first time. Those who are back again will have seen this slide before. It's one we've discussed previously, and what it talks about is the coming avalanche of cancer cases that we'll see in the United States between now and the year 2050. As shown in this CDC estimate, it's expected cancer cases will go up 50%. And it's important to recognize 1 in 3 people, in fact, 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women will get cancer in their lifetimes. This year, 40,000 new patients with cancer are diagnosed in New York City. It's estimated that by 2030, that number will be 47,000 and 60,000 by 2050. And the slide shows bar graphs, and at the bottom on the horizontal axis is age groups. So it shows those less than 50, 50 to 64, 65 to 74. And what you can see is that the 2015 numbers are in light blue, the 2050 estimates are in dark blue, that the numbers will be going up for every population group. More in older people because cancer is a disease of aging, and we do see more cancer in older patients. But even in younger patients, we're seeing more cancer, and particularly prostate, colon, and breast cancer, which we're seeing in 20, 30, and 40-year-olds that we never used to see before. MSK Pavilion is really critical to our institution's ability to not only address the volume of cases we're expecting, but to house the advanced technologies and interventions that will be needed to treat cancer in the coming decades. Next slide, please. Joining me today for our presentation and questions and answers are several of my esteemed Memorial Sloan Kettering colleagues: Laura Artizone, our Director of Nurse Anesthesia Services; Amador Centeno, Senior Vice President of Real Estate Development and Facilities Management; and Roger McLean, Director of Design and Construction and Facilities Management. Amador and Roger, you've met before, but Laura is here for the first time. And since it's the first time, Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us a little introduction to yourself.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me tonight. It's an honor and a privilege to speak with you. My name is Laura Artizone, and I've been a nurse for about 24 years. I've been at Memorial for a long time. I've left and come back many times because this is a very, very special place, and the things that we do to care for people is very special. I'm a nurse anesthetist. I run a large team of about 150 nurse anesthetists who provide anesthesia services across our enterprise for both children and adults undergoing cancer care. I'm also a resident of Roosevelt Island, and I have 2 young twins who attend New York City Public School, so I understand the sensitivity around this project. I also want to echo what Dr. Drebin said. Every day I see the need for a new pavilion. As we see cancer rates that are increasing in the coming years, we need the ability to be able to care for those patients and to be able to care for those New Yorkers. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. We're joined tonight by our design and construction team, including Jason Tavares, Rich Steimel, and Charlie Whitney of Turner Lend Lease, and Rob Masters and Troy Hoggard from Cannon Design. Many of these faces may be familiar to you from our previous Koch Center construction working group. And as they will tell you themselves, they're looking forward to the same consistent ongoing community engagement for this project. Next slide. I can't imagine a more challenging task for a construction team than building in a residential neighborhood adjacent to a major medical institution. The typical considerations of a construction project, from noise and vibration to building access to logistics and cleanliness, are amplified and scrutinized. For MSK and any medical facility, these are not merely inevitable byproducts of construction, but things that must be aggressively managed and minimized to the largest extent possible for the comfort of our community and the health and safety of our patients. Lives are truly on the line. And this is why we're here today, to share our plan for construction and get the benefit of your feedback. As we begin tonight's discussion, I ask that you remember that each detail has been and will continue to be meticulously planned to ensure the utmost care for our community and our patients. With that, let me now introduce Turner Lend-Lease, a joint venture between Turner Construction Company and Lend-Lease, formed specifically to serve as the construction manager for the Pavilion. In selecting Turner Lend-Lease, we have chosen two global construction managers with extensive experience in healthcare, including several projects in the Community Board 8 neighborhoods. As construction manager, Turner Lend-Lease will be responsible for directing and coordinating all daily construction activity regarding the Pavilion. That said, please know that we understand construction is inherently an invasive activity in any neighborhood, and your concerns relating to site logistics, construction nuisances, truck movement, vibration, and impacts of the project on the surrounding sidewalks, streets, and mass transit are very much our responsibility. Like you, we have a lot at stake here. Our staff and patients will continue to access Memorial Hospital, Rockefeller Labs, and our main campus every day of this construction period. While the day-to-day logistics and site operations will be under Turner Lend-Lease's control, MSK has imposed exacting standards for site safety, noise, dust, cleanliness, and efficiency, and will hold the Turner Lend-Lease team's feet to the fire to ensure these are met. These high standards are a condition of their contract and are calibrated to recognize that our neighbors, as well as our own patients and staff, will be adjacent to the construction site throughout. I trust this presentation will demonstrate the extent of our vigilance and readiness to respond to construction concerns. That said, I'll turn it over to Jason Tavares from Turner Lend-Lease.
Thank you for that introduction. Jason Tavares, I'm a project executive at Turner Lend-Lease. Thank you for having me here today. Excited to talk to you about this project. And what I want to do is take the time I have today to focus on some of the measures we're going to put in place throughout the duration of construction to ensure that we're minimizing the impact on the community, understanding that construction is inherently disruptive. So before we get into the details of the project, we wanted to talk a little bit about our experience in Community Board 8. We're no strangers to the area. As you can see here, this map identifies the extent of Community Board 8 and projects that Turner and Lend-Lease have executed within the Community Board. And if you click the next one, we can zoom in a little bit. Here we're identifying some of the projects that we specifically executed within the neighborhood itself. So close to the location of the new pavilion. I personally worked on the Coke project with Roger as one of my team members, and Kim, as I'm sure most of you know, for 5 years in my career. It's a time that I remember very fondly, and I'm excited to be back with MSK and back in the neighborhood working again. Next one. So we want to take some time now before we get into the details of the construction to talk through some of the things that we want to keep at the top of our list and be hyper focused on through construction based on the specifics of this community. So you can hit next. Before we extend out into the community, as Dr. Dreven alluded to during the introduction, building adjacent to a hospital itself has specific constraints and specific hypersensitivity that as the CM building the job, we have to adhere to, and the community itself will be the beneficiary of those constraints. We understand that they're going to be immunocompromised, people essentially going through cancer treatment up against our site. And the last thing we want in building this cancer facility is to further compromise anyone's health. So it'll be our focus to minimize the amount of dust going into the community or anything that would negatively impact the health of any of the patients of Memorial Sloan Kettering or anyone in the neighborhood. In addition to that, directly adjacent to the site of the new pavilion is the Rockefeller Research Lab, where research is being conducted critical to the battle of cancer care as we understand it. We've been briefed on the sensitivity to noise and vibration of those experiments, and MSK is going to be there to hold our feet to the fire to make sure that we're not impacting any of those experiments at all. So that's an additional layer of sensitivity with noise and vibration that we're going to be held accountable to by MSK throughout the duration of construction. As you see on the map, as we leave MSK's campus, we have PS 183 in the neighborhood. I myself am a father of a 4-year-old attending an elementary school in New York City Public School. So I'm personally sensitive to the anxiety that might be associated with that. It's a big city. There's a lot going on. And the last thing I want to do is at all affect anything related to, God forbid, safety, but also just the ability of those students to concentrate and be successful in school. Again, my son is at an elementary school, so I take that personally, and I would hold myself personally accountable to ensuring that that doesn't happen. We also have residences in the neighborhood. I am a native New Yorker. I was born and raised in New York City. It's a big city. There's a lot of noise. It's busy. We understand that, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't all be entitled to a sanctuary in our homes. We want to be able to support that sanctuary, not disrupt people in their homes and their place of rest. So that's going to be a focus through the construction as well. And same thing will apply to the entire area, the church, and everything in the neighborhood. You can click next. So now that we've talked a little bit about the reasons or the impetus for being extremely sensitive, careful with things like noise, dust, we've talked about the why. I want to spend some time talking about the how and the ways we're going to implement and mitigate these construction disruptions. So at the very forefront, and this starts with today and this meeting, and that's why I'm extremely grateful that I'm welcomed and invited to take part in this meeting. At the very forefront is open dialogue. We talked a little bit about the stakeholders in the community, but we want to make sure that we continue the dialogue from now until construction is done. That's engaging in the construction working groups, having regular meetings, going over 30-day look ahead, so that you understand within the month what's happening. You're engaged. You're able to be heard on your concerns about what's happening throughout the month. We would be setting up a hotline for construction to allow people to report anything they see, and give us an opportunity to address it immediately. There would be websites to broadcast announcements of things happening. And then when there are specific critical activities that may affect the community in a specific way, we would have meetings targeted towards planning out and getting feedback on those activities. One of our major focuses, as we talked about, is minimizing noise and vibration. Construction is inherently noisy, and there's no way about that, but we can do our best to make that as minimal as possible. What we've listed here is some of the engineered solutions that we would be engaging in at the start of construction and now through planning to help minimize that in the future. It includes things like sound insulation on the site fence, sound baffles and shrouds on equipment, and just engineered solutions to minimize noise. And then once we get into construction, the next step would be holding ourselves accountable to staying within what gets established in pre-construction as the acceptable measures. MSK has hired a third-party consultant that will be there monitoring our activities and holding us accountable. In addition to that, we would have our own noise and vibration sensors so that we're getting direct feedback and we're able to see when something is outside of acceptable measures and address it immediately. After noise, we're going to be hyper focused on minimizing dust and dirt. And the focus here is to make sure that all dust and dirt stays within the job site and doesn't leave our job site. That's a big part of that, is making sure it never becomes airborne. And what we have here is some of the activities and approaches to ensuring that stays true. And that's washing trucks before they leave when they are leaving our construction site, wetting surfaces to prevent dust from getting airborne. But the focus is to keeping it in our job site through the duration of construction. Now I want to talk a little bit about our approach to minimizing the interference to vehicular and pedestrian traffic. First, I want to start with the planning that's happening now. So we've provided input on number of trucks, number of workers anticipated through every single stage of construction to consultants hired by MSK. They're analyzing that and confirming that what we do doesn't adversely or doesn't over adversely impact the community itself. through all phases of construction. Obviously, we have to share any plans that we produce with the Department of Transportation. They're going to dictate what we're allowed and not allowed to do, and we're going to have to operate within the parameters of what the Department of Transportation and the city allows us to do. Same would be for the MTA with the bus routing that goes around. It's coordination with the MTA and abiding by what they allow us to do. In addition to that, we would focus on coordinating with other construction projects through the course of our construction. When I was on the Coke project, at the same time as that for MSK, there was a major construction project for NYPH, the DHK Center, at the same time as the overbuild for the Rockefeller University at the FDR. And through all stages of construction, we were constantly coordinating with those other construction teams to essentially piggyback off of each other with shutdowns and coordinate when we were doing activities so that it was minimizing across the three projects the number of shutdowns and impacts on the overall community. And we would look to do the same thing here. We would also look to use approaches of offsite construction to minimize the number of workers and deliveries coming to the site. So plan and build as much as we can outside of the construction site, to the extent that we may even be bringing partial rooms completely constructed. Those are workers and trucks that are less workers and less trucks coming to our site. And then back to the same point I made at the top of the discussion with communication, with changes on the site and with pathways and workflows. We want to make sure that we're communicating those changes in advance. So ongoing and direct coordination with the school, with all the stakeholders we talked about up until now, advanced announcements of any changes. And then when we're at the point of change, clear signage to direct people so that they're not lost. And then personnel from the Turner Lend-Lease family there to guide people through those changes on the site themselves. So now we've talked through some of the approaches towards mitigating things like sound and dust and traffic concerns. Obviously, those were a part of some of the things that we'll do. I'm going to take some time to walk you through the logistics themselves at each of the major phases of construction, and then the schedule and the time anticipated for each one of those phases, so that you get a sense for what the site will look like when we're under construction. So first, I'll orient you on the slide. In the center, you have the construction site itself, and that'll update as we get through each phase of construction. On the bottom, there's a timeline from 2024 to 2030, giving you the approximate duration of construction. And we've identified or highlighted the time period when the stage that we're talking about in each slide is anticipated to occur. So at the very start, we're going to have the demolition of the existing buildings there. Focus at that point is communication on routing. This is our first time starting construction. This is our first time building a site fence and turning it into a construction site. We will have made sure that up until then, we've communicated the expectations, what we're doing, how we're doing it with all of the stakeholders, so no one's surprised when we show up, and no one's surprised with how we set ourselves up at the very start of construction. During demolition, we want to focus on noise mitigation and dust mitigation. On some targeted noise mitigation solutions would be making sure that the debris chutes, or we plan to make sure that the debris chutes when we're doing demolition are inside of the building, not outside of the building, as you may sometimes see on construction sites. They're sound insulated so that we're as little noise as possible is propagating outside of the site, and the same thing with containing dust through the demolition phase. Next phase we want to talk a little bit about is rock excavation. Rock excavation is chopping rock. It's breaking rock. There's no way about it being a noisy thing. That's just the truth. But what we want to do is be smart in pre-planning to minimize the extent and the duration of noise that occurs through the rock chopping, through the rock excavation period. That may be through approaches like blasting, so that you're with a single blast, reducing the rock to the smallest pieces possible. I know from my time at Coke, I was there full time while we were doing rock excavation there. Really what impacts you is the constant chopping of the rock afterwards to get it to small enough pieces to get off the site. And what we want to do is, in as big a swing as possible, get the rock to as small pieces as possible, so that we're reducing the amount of chopping. And rock blasting is something we do on a lot of jobs, and that's one of the best ways to accomplish that. And this is something that would happen for about 3/4 of the construction duration. Next, we want to talk a little bit about the foundations period. Here it's mostly concrete operations, and with concrete operations, there's dust. So it's the same thing of making sure that we're cleaning anything that leaves the site before it leaves and keeping all the dust inside of the site. In addition to that, this is the first time that we would see an increase in trucks coming to the site with concrete trucks at those pours. So it's pre-coordinating for those pours, making sure that we have room within the site to receive those trucks. We're coordinating timing for when they come so that they're as minimal of a hindrance on the neighboring community as possible. The other focus at this stage with receiving trucks and through every stage of construction is we want to minimize or eliminate to the extent possible trucks going down 66 or 67th Street. So we want to allow trucks to enter in through York and leave through York. So we're minimizing the impact to those streets. Now what you see here is us going into the structure and facade phase of construction. Here, vehicular traffic is at an increased level because we're getting deliveries for steel, for facade, for interior work. So this is when we'll be at both peak trucks received and workers at the site. So our pre-planning to make sure that we are coordinating that so that we're not getting any more trucks to the site than we're able to receive is going to be key. And that's just part of what we do. As you can see, the site fence itself is pushed out and the trucks are brought in. So one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is that we're creating enough room within the site to absorb the trucks within the site so that they're not outside of the community while we're picking from steel from them, while we're picking panels from them. Really trying to focus on pulling all of the construction into the site and setting a clean barrier between us and the community. Other thing I want to mention briefly is number 2 on that slide. That's a bridge that you're going to hear about a little bit later that connects the pavilion to the Memorial campus. Erecting that bridge itself is going to require some closures of 67th Street. And what we're doing now is coordinating with the design team and figuring out ways to optimize prefabrication there so that we're only limiting those closures to a handful of weekends and not having extended durations on 67th Street. Now we step into the last phase of construction. This is the interiors phase. And really the focus is all the construction is moving from the outside of the building where everyone can see it to inside of the building. We're starting to break down our site fence, finish the site work, concrete, landscaping, and everything associated with the site, and turn spaces back over to the community. So it's communicating those changes in site fences as we start to demobilize and turn spaces over. As you can see, identified by the one on the slide those are the 2 locations currently intended for the hoists servicing the building. Those would be active for the earlier stages of the interiors construction, and again, those would be demobilized as we turn the spaces back over to the public and demobilize from the site.
Thank you, Jason. We're going to shift gears just a little, and I'm going to ask Shelley Friedman, our land use attorney, to explain the revocable consent process. Shelley.
Thank you, Dr. Drebin. Good evening, everyone. We had some discussions with the board leadership about presenting to you the actual application for the bridge. As we discussed at the land use presentation, revocable consents are not zoning issues because they take place in the public way. And those types of applications are administered by the Department of Transportation. Not all revocable consents come to the community board. This one would, but in the normal sense, it's my understanding that these applications would not go to the land use committee anyway. They would go to the Transportation Committee. And so what I'm really doing here is providing the full presentation that we would make to the Transportation Committee on an actual revocable consent application over a public street. Next slide, please. There are many precedents for connecting bridges, revocable consent applications. New York has a long history of providing these kind of consents over public streets. The first was the first revocable consent for a bridge over a public street was actually for a hospital. It was for a New York hospital in 1907, which was connecting two buildings which they owned in what is now Tribeca. That bridge is still existing. I have a photo of it in the lower left-hand corner. There's also a plaque which memorializes that it was a New York hospital bridge. These are now both buildings are now, and the bridge itself is a city landmark. So this was revocable consent number one for a bridge. Since 1907, there have been 26 revocable consents issued, and one special city planning commission public special permit issued for a covered bridge over a city street. Of those 26 plus 2, which is the special permit, 13 of them have actually been for hospitals. So there's a history here. I know this is not something that this community board sees. It's not something that most community boards have seen. Obviously, you have Hunter's Bridges as another example of these kind of bridges over public streets. I know this is an unusual application to present to this community board, but it's well within the boundaries of the city processes for processing and requesting. Revocable consent applications are primarily engineering applications. They're not what you typically see in ULURP drawings with a lot of accessorized elevations and sections and colored renderings. This is an infrastructure agency, and the drawings that they want to see are basically about the engineering of this bridge and not what its purposes are or what it's actually going to look like in terms of its ultimate design. So I want to show you, there are only 4 or 5 of them, and I want to just show you what's in the application package that is now filed at DOT. The first, and these are the required drawings for any revocable consent application for a bridge. The first slide are the photographs and the site plan. You can see the Pavilion site in the hash marks, the bridge leading to the larger MSK campus, and in particular, Memorial Hospital. Next slide, please. DOT then wants to see a more detailed site plan that shows in greater depth the location of the sites and the connection between them. The bridge, of course, is in the red. Next slide, please. They then ask to see the bridge in section, and in the left you have a section that shows the bridge if you were looking from the north or the south. Obviously, there are buildings in the way of this view, but this is showing you the north elevation of the Pavilion and how the bridge would run from that building north to Memorial Hospital. The slide on the drawing on the right is a section which you might say was taken from the east side of York Avenue, looking west, and shows you the stacking of the Pavilion on the left and Memorial Hospital on the right, and the bridge running in between them. The bridge is approximately 74 feet over grade across 67th Street. The next slide, please. This slide is the true engineering slide. Again, the city's not as interested in the buildings as they are in what's in the streets and what's under the streets and all of the various municipal infrastructure. This is a survey that they require, from which they can assure themselves that there are going to be no impact on any of the infrastructure, water, sewer, utilities, other conduits, New York subway for cabling or the like. Next slide, please. And this is the engineering details for the bridge itself. Again, it shows the bridge from various angles, but it shows it as an engineering project, not necessarily as a land use or urban design application. And that's really it. That is the entire application by which the Department of Transportation will approve the bridge. It will not be included in the ULURP drawings that ultimately come to you to land use. And that's why there was a common interest between your board leadership and us in taking this opportunity to run through these drawings so that you were fully aware of what this aspect of the overall project applications are all about. Now, I've just described the approval process for the bridge. I'm going to turn this over to Rob Masters at Canon, who will provide you with much greater depth than we would ever provide in a revocable consent application regarding the programmatic purposes for the bridge. Rob.
Thanks, Shelley. I think we really wanted to add to that description of the revocable consent that Shelley just walked through by first focusing in on the need for the bridge and why the bridge is so critically important to the Pavilion as an expansion of MSK's main campus, and also give a little bit of conceptual look and feel for the bridge and what and how we've been envisioning it from a design perspective, so you can understand what the visual presence of the bridge will be in the neighborhood. So to start with, we wanted to really focus in on the necessity for the bridge. As Dr. Drebin and Laura noted at the outset of our discussion tonight, the Pavilion is a direct, proactive response to the rise in the incidence of cancer nationally and in our community. And the Pavilion is truly an extension to the main campus. It is the ability for us to take the clinical services that MSK provides on the main campus today and expand them meaningfully to respond to that need in the future and have the services available as those cancer cases increase, as we see they will. We're providing primarily patient beds and surgical and procedural services in the Pavilion. And the bridge connections allow us to then tie those expanded services back to the main campus to allow for the care teams, the critical clinical support service teams to work back and forth between main campus and the Pavilion across East 67th Street to transport patients who are in a very fragile state and require both an effective environment to move throughout the facility, as well as the most efficient travel times necessary between the patient rooms and the modalities in the Pavilion and services that are on the main campus.
Rob, if I can just interrupt you there, I think one of the things we really need to re-emphasize is that the Pavilion is not a freestanding hospital. The Pavilion is an extension of Memorial Hospital and its programs. It is not able to function independently, and the bridge, as you've said so eloquently, is critical to our ability to deliver care across both buildings, because the Pavilion by itself would not be able to do that. Laura, do you want to give us your thoughts?
Sure, I would love to. And if I could just have you imagine for a second. So you're a patient who just had an anesthetic for cancer, and you need to go back safely to your room, right? We'll take you through that bridge. You're a clinician who's responding to a medical emergency and you're in the other building. You can safely go through that bridge efficiently. You are a family member who's accompanying a patient to a necessary scan or a radiology procedure. You can safely go across that bridge and you can get to where you need to be efficiently. The way we have it now, you would need to go down multiple elevators, go in the basement, go through a tunnel that goes underground, that is not big enough, that is not efficient enough, and is not safe for the complexity of care that we're giving to our patients now and what we'll be giving to them in the future.
Thanks, Lauren. Rob, I'll turn it back to you to
Yeah.
finish it.
No, absolutely. And I think those are a clear demonstration of the real need for this bridge connection to really allow for the care excellence to continue at MSK and to meaningfully connect the pavilion back to the main campus in support of that excellent care. So on the next slide, you'll see, again, this is a site plan that really parallels the site plan imagery that Shelley had shared. It's really showing the footprint of the pavilion and that bridge connection back to main campus. Next slide, please. Here we're showing what each of those stories of that two-story bridge would connect back to the pavilion. So on the left, we have critical support services from pharmacy and lab and biomedical engineering and medical physics that are located on the lower floor with the bridge connection back. So these are some of the really critical support services that are working not only to support the patients in pavilion, but working with spaces that are back on the main campus to effectively distribute pharmaceuticals and medications, to run lab tests and confirm procedures that are in process, and to manage all of the medical equipment across the campus. On the upper level, which is on the right-hand side at the 6th floor of the pavilion, is our new diagnostic radiology facility. This is an inpatient facility that will serve not only the patients in pavilion, but also patients across in Memorial Hospital, allowing for very effective access to care. And of course, at each of these levels of connection, there's an opportunity to transport patients across East 67th Street for patients in pavilion that are moving to medical destinations within Memorial Hospital or the main campus, as well as patients that are being admitted through Memorial Hospital and coming to a bed or to the surgical platform in the pavilion. Next slide. So as Laura mentioned, we looked at the existing tunnel connection and we realized the critical deficiencies that would really limit the ability to move patients through that existing tunnel connection, with the limitations of the physical environment of the tunnel itself, the vertical transportation within the Rockefeller Research Building that are really not set up for patient movement of any kind, and the extended travel times that would result from moving patients through that existing tunnel connection. Next slide. So here we're demonstrating really the effects of the immediacy of the bridge connections, and we've done time studies to really look at the real world movement of patient from beds in pavilion to clinical destinations in the Memorial campus and vice versa, to really understand and demonstrate the effectiveness of the bridge connection on supporting best-in-class patient care. Next, please. So here is a rendered view of one of the sectional views that Shelley had shared previously. It really demonstrates that the height of the bridge is very supportive of maintaining sight lines back to the river all the way along East 67th Street, and really working to minimize that impact on pedestrian and community experience along that existing 67th Street corridor. And lastly, here's a view looking back to the city from York Avenue. The conceptual design for the bridge is really intended to create a transparency and to minimize the visual impact of the bridge connection on the pedestrians and on the neighborhood, so that it is a very clean line and minimized visual impact on your everyday experience walking across York Avenue or down 67th Street.
Thank you, Rob. This concludes our presentation. I want to thank you all again for taking the time to learn about the pavilion. We really appreciate Community Board's input, advice, and thoughts. And the pavilion will be critical to delivering the very best cancer care to our patients in the coming decades. And so we hope our enthusiasm for it is matched by yours. we're happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. Well, let's see, we have a bunch of people queued up, and so we'll start with Nathan W. If everyone could tell us sort of where you live, and that would be, first we'll do members of the public, so go ahead, Nathan.
Absolutely, yeah, thanks. I really appreciate the time today. Anthony, Felice, for you facilitating this discussion. I admittedly haven't had the chance to join some of the presentations in the past, but it was definitely informative to hear some of this. I am a resident of the neighborhood. I live on 66th Street, so directly in the area that would be impacted here. And just have a few thoughts that I'd like to share, just bring some things to this group's attention for further discussion. Maybe one question, which is the slide deck, will that be made publicly available? And I only ask that because I have an issue with the first slide. I think it was the first slide. And I'm actually thankful that in Dr. Drebin's opening remarks, you were accurate in your description of what's on the slide. The slide as written, because I think this whole project is predicated on this CDC report, right? And the slide says something about will increase, right? But in your opening remarks, Dr. Drebin, you accurately said are expected to increase, right? So I think that's the slide as currently written is a bit misleading. So if you could please revise the slide. Yeah, 1 in 3 people will have cancer. 1 in 3 people are expected to have cancer, right? It is expected that these will be the numbers over the next 3 decades. And you, again, accurately said that in your presentation of the slide. I just think that the slide as written is a bit misleading and doesn't characterize the report accurately. Secondarily to that, I think, as we know, we just lived through a global pandemic. And while the CDC is an incredibly smart and reputable organization, we know that estimates out of the CDC aren't always 100% accurate. And so while, epidemiological estimates are very, very complex and there's a lot that goes into these types of forecasting, I think that the whole crux of this is predicated on this report and these statistics. And so I don't necessarily think that folks should over-index on what that singular report says. That being said, I am by no means debating the need for a facility like this to provide for care for cancer patients, again, over the next 3 decades. What I'm debating here is the location. I don't necessarily think that this project serves the need of the community. I think it serves the need of Memorial Sloan Kettering. And as it should, right? You're an organization, you want to build it as an extension to Memorial. It's synergistic with, everything you just talked about with the bridge. I get that, right? But let's not fool anyone on the line. It's not serving the community, it's serving Memorial Sloan Kettering and no one else. I think, part of the comments that were made were about mitigating the negative impacts to the community from the construction project, whether that's dust and particles and noise and vibration and the like. But you self-admit, right, that you can only minimize these negative impacts. You cannot eliminate them. However, you could eliminate them by choosing an alternate site for this project. And so look, you're a big organization with a tremendous amount of resources. I think you genuinely care about your patients. I think you genuinely care about the community, or so you claim. And if you do, I think it would be in the best interest of the community for Memorial Sloan Kettering to choose an alternate site for this project. Now, and I'm going to wrap up here shortly because I know others want a chance to speak. So thank you for the time. I'll leave you with a few anecdotes and examples of a couple of other things. So just a few months ago now, maybe 6 months ago, there was an elderly couple leaving the parking garage on 66th Street. And unfortunately, and look, this is not MSK's fault by any stretch, unfortunately hit the accelerator over the gas. Ran right into a parked car onto the sidewalk into a building across the street. Now, that's an isolated incident, but I bring it up because the propensity or the risk for that to happen again in the future with a facility that would be 3 times the size of what's currently there just increases as well. And just a few months ago, a singular construction dump truck that was going down 66th Street created a sinkhole, fell straight through the street right in front of the elementary school. The street was shut down for a couple of weeks for them to repair it. And I'm glad to hear you say that York will be used as the thoroughfare for any construction or heavy machinery, because I think the infrastructure on these residential blocks has clearly shown to not be able to withstand anything more severe than that. A crane, I mean, that was one truck, right? So I'm glad to hear you say that York will be used. I think that brings up a different issue, which is 3 blocks down the road, you have the entrance to the FDR, and traffic is always a nightmare here regardless. And I think there was already a session on this in the past, so I won't belabor the point, but I did want to bring it up. And I also just want to touch on two more things. There were comments made about how, your home is your sanctuary. We want to preserve that. I fully agree with that, but I also want to remind everyone, home is just not a sanctuary anymore. Home is also a workplace, okay? Many people are working remote. I work remote 2 days a week. I have a hybrid schedule. And so you're not just impacting people's personal lives in their home, you're impacting people's work as well. So I just want to remind people of that. And then one comment that was made about during the bridge presentation of the session here was that the Pavilion is not being built as a standalone hospital. I just find it very hard to believe that what will be the world's tallest hospital cannot stand alone as a facility. Again, I totally hear you on all the synergy that it brings for as an extension to Memorial and to shuttle patients back and forth. I get that, but you could easily choose a different site for this project. I shouldn't say easily, this is not my area of expertise. You could choose a different site for this project, and this facility could stand alone as a cancer hospital. In New York, Manhattan is not a big city. You can shuttle patients back and forth to wherever they need to go. You can get your labs back and forth. Like this is, you have buildings that are not directly connected to Memorial in the neighborhood. And so logistically, I find it hard to believe that it can't stand alone. And then one thing my last comment that I found a little concerning to hear from Turner Lend-Lease, at least I think it was the gentleman from Turner Lend-Lease, presenting this was, you claim all of this expertise, you showed the map of all the projects in the neighborhood, and then there was a comment made that this is actually the first time that you're undertaking a project of this scale. And so that just doesn't instill a lot of confidence in me that you cannot assuage my concern of being able to mitigate all of these things. I don't necessarily have full confidence, given this is the first type of undertaking or of this scale, that there won't be issues. Again, I think that the project is noble. I certainly think that there will be a proliferation of cancer, not just in the US, but globally over the next 3 decades. To what extent, I can't say. And I'm not debating the need for this facility. I'm debating the need for the location. So with that, I'll pass it over to whoever's next. And thanks again.
Thank you, Nathan. Just to address a couple of your comments, I would agree with you, and I think I did try to express that these are projections. We don't know for sure what the future holds, but projections are always really based around a cone of uncertainty that can be higher or lower. And so these are what we believe cancer rates are going to do over the next 20 or 30 years. You're right, they may not be that bad, and in that case, we may be able to put a flower shop in the lobby of the Pavilion. But what if they're worse? What if there's, a 70% increase in cancer by the year 2050? If we don't do this now, there won't be the ability to care for the patients who need it, who need the kind of care that they can get at a place like Memorial Sloan Kettering, if we don't start this project now. Do you want to, Jason, talk about the mitigation a little bit? I believe we have in terms of building size, this building is virtually the same size in terms of square footage as Coke.
Right. I was going to say, and I don't know, maybe I was misheard. I did not say that Turner Lend-Lease did not have experience building a project of this size. I mean, Turner Lend-Lease are the most experienced builders that you have in New York City. That aside, I personally worked on the Coke building, which is comparable in size to this. So it's not even the companies have the experience. I personally have the experience. And I know Rich and Charlie, who are also on this call, can make that same statement miles more than I can, because they've been they're my leaders and they've been with the company longer. So I don't know where that statement came from, but I just wanted to make sure I clarified that. And I appreciate you saying that the homes are more than just a place of respite. I also worked from home during COVID in New York City, and I understand how challenging that was in New York City. And to me, that just heightens that heightens my commitment to making sure that I'm minimizing the impacts through construction. I think I captured your two comments.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah.
Okay, next we have Laura Jackson. It's about to be unmuted.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for hearing from me. I don't want to talk about construction tonight because I really want to go back to the question of traffic. I don't think it was adequately addressed in the last meeting. So I do have some comments on traffic, and then also on the green space between 1233 York Avenue and the MSK's research lab. So I'm Laura Jackson. I have lived on 66 between First and York for 31 years. Every day I witness the bottleneck of cars trying to get into MSK's parking garage. The line of cars backs up onto York Avenue, blocking the bus lane, adding to the already severe congestion on York. It is my understanding that MSK will not be adding any additional parking spaces as they increase hospital capacity by 28 operating rooms and over 200 patient rooms. The plan that was presented was to make all parking by appointment entering into the garage single file on 66th Street, and the rest of the cars would be handled by valet via a drive-through area between 66th and 67th Street. What was not addressed was where all of these cars will be placed once they are handed off to the valets. There is nowhere to put cars. This isn't a restaurant in the suburbs where valet parking works. This is a densely populated residential area where parking garages have been closing over the past few years, and to my knowledge, no new garages are being built to replace them. There just isn't any place to park this onslaught of additional cars. According to MSK's current website, there are 4 public parking garages on 69th Street between 1st and 2nd, when in fact, there is now only 1, and it fills up quickly. The other garages have all closed or gone private. This is one small example of how out of touch MSK is with the parking situation in our neighborhood. On paper, the valet plan looks great, but in reality, it is nothing more than magical thinking. At the last task force meeting, Valerie Mason voiced a concern that drivers will be inclined to make drop-offs in front of the hospital on York. I would add that cars dropping patients off will likely be double and possibly triple parked, as the curbside bus lane will be jammed with cars in line for the garage and the valet. Unless MSK can triple or quadruple its parking capacity, which apparently it can't, this will be an impossible burden on our public streets and a continuing tragedy for patients subjected to heightened stress levels just prior to their surgeries. So that was parking. And next, I'd just like to draw attention to the green space. Will, did you get my photo?
I did not. I did not know to look for a photo.
Okay. I emailed you a photo. Anyway, there's a green space. If you can find it and upload it quickly, that'd be good. I emailed it to you. So there's a green space between 1233 York Avenue and MSK's Rockefeller Lab, directly above the parking garage. This open green space is essential for healthy air circulation between 66th and 67th Street. It also provides a safe pathway for a large variety of bird species which nest on and migrate through the Upper East Side. And of course, it provides outdoor space. There it is, thank you. And of course, it provides outdoor space for MSK employees and students to take their breaks. To replace this precious green space with glass walls and vents that release off gases from an airtight tower, adding to the urban heat island effect and harmful climate change pollution, is most definitely a step in the wrong direction. If every choice we make is in the direction of coming into balance with nature, perhaps there's a chance that instead of a 50% increase in cancer by the year 2050, there just might be a 50% decrease. Every decision we're making right now matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Roger, do you want to take the?
How you doing, Laura? And good evening to everybody. And thank you for having us for this conversation. I want to just start with talking about the parking scenario. And MSK is very much on the same page with you about how we are stewards of the community, stewards of our patients, loved ones, and staff members as we maneuver through the density of the Upper East Side. So there's going to be a combination of work. There's going to be a combination of work between the built environment, the environmental and traffic analysis, along with the operational opportunities and the operational criteria that we have to put forth to make this work. So we're fully aware that it goes beyond what we design. It goes beyond what we engineer. It goes into how we operate as an organization. So when we talk about some of those spaces, back to the operational piece, something that we do right now, which is something that we need to adjust, is the way we keep our garage open even when it's at capacity. We know that this is something as an operational criteria that we have to adjust because we only have as much spaces as we have and as much square footage that we have within those basement areas. So the plan here is really to utilize that through block from 67th, 66th to 67th going north to really help us manage the traffic within our footprint. We then have to staff up to allow our team members to be able to take the necessary cars based on our amount of people that we're bringing to the building into the garage area and park safely so that patients can go right up to their appointments and receive the cancer care that we provide. So I understand your concern. You lived here for 30 plus years. You've experienced our shortfalls in some of our opportunities that we have here on the Upper East Side. But what we want to make sure that you understand is that it goes beyond the traffic analysis. It goes beyond the design and the built environment. There's an operational piece that we're dedicated to make sure that we make this work. We're trying to, again, take all of our traffic off of the city streets and into our own footprint. And again, really work with our operations team to make sure the right people and the right staff complement is there to help deal with the demand. So we are fully aware through our engineering analysis, we're fully aware through our design parameters, and we've also taken the step of understanding that that handoff to operations has to really close the deal on making sure that we hold up our end of the bargain here.
Okay. Next, I guess we have Catherine Anderson.
Good evening, everyone. I appreciate being able to talk with you tonight. And like my neighbors, I don't object to Memorial Sloan Kettering's desire to provide world-class care to their patients. I just object to the location. Building the world's tallest hospital in a residential area just it won't work with our current infrastructures. And per my reading of the CDC paper, the increase in cancer rates is tied to an increase in population, not to an explosion of new cases. This neighborhood is primarily residential and quiet, with most buildings under a quarter of the height of the proposed tower. We are not equipped to handle additional cars when traffic to access the FDR and Queensboro Bridge brings cars to a standstill daily. You have already indicated tonight you cannot increase parking and will continue lining people up in their cars, which is where the majority of the fights occur. I live on 66th Street across from the garage marked active parking on your map. Every week, especially early in the mornings, I wake to honking and shouting as stressed out-of-town patients and their families get out of their vehicles to yell at one another about traffic and space availability. A few times a month, including twice last week, I witnessed fistfights over parking, even when hospital staff are on hand to theoretically de-escalate the situation. These new facilities will increase visitors and traffic to the area and exacerbate these problems, especially at the proposed level of patient increase. There have also been accidents, including the previously mentioned time when a gentleman exiting the garage drove their car into a car and then a residential building, narrowly missing two of my neighbors. Demolishing the current structure will require equipment to be placed on a street that recently collapsed under the weight of a construction truck. MSK may want to take advantage of space by building upward, but they will also be taking resources from the neighborhood around them to do so and straining our infrastructure further. I would also like to know what the resolution process will be for complaints called into the hotline. Will there be any sort of penalties to MSK or to the architectural firm for repeated unresolved complaints?
Amador and Jason, do you want to take those?
I can start by taking the question about equipment during the demolition phase on the street itself. I just wanted to make sure that I express the amount of effort that goes into deciding where to place equipment when you're doing the demolition of the building. And for the demolition of the building, there's not major equipment that we anticipate being on the street itself. Most of the equipment will be up against the building, the existing building footprint, not out on the street inside of the construction site. We don't really anticipate during the demolition phase having major equipment on the street. But in either way, wherever we place equipment, we make sure that we do bores to understand what the earth is underneath the equipment. We have loads and capacities for the equipment itself. So all of the proper engineering is going to be undergone when we do that. In terms of complaints, I can't speak to penalties. I think that's more for MSK to speak to. But I would say, I've been on construction sites and received hotline calls, and that's something that I know we jump on immediately as Turner and as Lend-Lease. We jump on immediately and address. That's one. Two, the city itself holds us accountable. The DOT holds us accountable for violating any rules associated with that. Same thing with the Department of Building. There's noise codes. There's codes in the city that keep us in line when we're building the building.
Amador, do you want to talk about the institutional response and oversight of the Turner Lend-Lease?
Yeah, I would just add, at the end of the day, we're ultimately responsible for all the complaints and ensuring that the contractors address all of them in a timely fashion. So we're still, the communication metrics about how we receive that and how we get that information back to you, that's still being put together. And obviously we'll publish that as we get closer to the start of construction. But the expectation from the hospital's perspective is that we want clear metrics of how we receive that information, clear turnaround time, and clear modes of how we communicate that information. The one thing about parking, and I know we keep talking about future state, part of what we're trying to respond to, right? We recognize the long lines. And so part of what we're trying to respond to in a future state of having a parking system interface with the patient systems across the street so that we're able to, in essence, communicate to patients before they leave home, whether they have a parking spot with us or not. So that we're trying to get ahead of the fact that if they leave their homes, they have to have an appointment in order to park with us. So that process is going to get developed in the coming years. We expect that to be in place by the time this property opens. But that reservation schedule is specifically designed with the intent to try to eliminate, because right now the parking garage is open. People will just choose to wait because they feel that there is no mechanism to let people know that the garage is at capacity or filled, other than when they arrive here.
And let me share with you my own experience along with Jason and with Roger of how the construction working group functioned as a clearinghouse for these kind of hotline complaints. There was a construction working group both for Josie Robertson at by the bridge at 61st Street and for Coke. And I would imagine in this construction working group, you as a 66th Street resident and your neighbors will participate in it. That would be consistent with the past experience. A call comes into the hotline, it's logged in, it's discussed at the next monthly meeting of the construction working group. If it hasn't been resolved, there's a report back about how that call was resolved, how quickly it was returned, what the substance of the complaint was, what the response was. And that's something that is shared with the group in large. And if there are ways to address the communication system that can be improved, they're considered. But it's a very transparent and a process that keeps MSK and Turner Glenlease accountable for its delivery of responses to calls that come in. And I think that worked well. There will be calls. We know there will be calls. And I think we're setting up a similar system this time to make sure that they're handled in a similar way.
And I think our first line of defense is partnership. Partnership with this community board, partnership with our construction managers to really hear the concerns, to figure out ways to mitigate, to figure out ways to do things better. Ultimately, it comes down to penalty, because if we're not listening and we're not doing what we need to do, as Amador said, MSK is ultimately responsible and accountable for making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to do. But I think what we want to put out there to this community board and put out there to our partners here, our CM partners, is our first line of defense is partnership. What are the things that you're hearing? How can we do it better? How can we work together to get there? So I hope that answered your question and responded accordingly.
Hey, thank you. And thank you, Catherine. We have next Kathleen Steed.
Yes, I am a cancer patient at Memorial Sloan Kettering, the kind of person that everyone has been talking about. I'm already part of the 2 of 3 who has cancer, and I know from statistics that I'm much more likely to have cancer again. I live uptown, not in the area, but when I moved here some 40 years ago, I would look out my back window and it was all trees and people's gardens, and eventually developers bought part of it and another part of it, and I see bricks and concrete. If I end up with cancer again, would I trade maybe 4 years of discomfort and noise and whatever to have a chance to live? No. I mean, I'm listening here and I'm sympathetic because a lot of things have gone on in our backyard, et cetera, but it's me you're talking about. And I keep thinking, if I were told, I'm sorry, we can't see you, we don't have the rooms here, and it'll be another 3 months, and just let your cancer go for 3 months, right? So this is a proper treatment, and enough treatment and available facilities are important for me as the cancer patient that has been mentioned here. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Next, we have, wait a minute, there's at least one other. I thought there was another person here. Jill McManus, who's on the phone.
Hello, I'm a resident of your district, and I'm at the moment living next to a site. It's a block away from my apartment. And it is constantly disturbing. They've been doing the blasting. Now they're hammering the rocks or whatever and putting in steel beams. I know it's going to be 3 years, probably the end of my life. I will be listening to the building going up. So is thinking of patients that are already in the hospital, or the doctors that are doing delicate surgeries. How will they be affected by this? How will their nerves last? Past
Well,
experience have been with other such buildings near hospitals.
I think the question was, will the noise and the commotion of the construction affect the ability of doctors at Memorial to care for cancer patients and do surgery? And certainly that's something we're working very closely with Turner Lend-Lease and with our facilities teams to make sure that we minimize this type of impact. I think it's fair to say that almost nothing stops a surgeon from focusing on their work, but at the same time, we don't want to strain that focus more than necessary. And in addition, as I think was mentioned by Jason in his discussions, we also have incredibly delicate scientific instruments in Rockefeller Research Labs. There's a thing called a cryo-electron microscope that is both one of the most expensive and one of the most paradigm-changing scientific instruments that allows you to do electron microscopy at a level that's never been done before, but it's quite delicate. And we're making sure that this facility will not create noise or vibrations that alters that in the immediately adjacent building, which I would hope will mean that there will be even less impact on residents across the street and on Memorial Hospital activities.
Well, that's why I wanted to mention the patients, the comfort of the patients recovering under stress. They're already being woken up early in the morning and throughout the night, and now they're going to have noise. Thinking of what the lady said before, Kathleen, that it's very stressful.
Well, we're working very hard to try to see that we minimize those kind of negative impacts.
I'm less excited about your equipment than I am about should I be there myself and have to live through that.
I guess what I was using the example that if it doesn't disturb a very fragile machine, I don't think it'll disturb someone sleeping within our four walls.
Ears?
The machine is sensitive to vibrations, far more sensitive than the human ear. I don't want to tell you about the science. I'm happy to tell you about the science, but that's not why Community Board 8 is here tonight. But we're going to work very hard to try to really minimize the impact outside of the construction site with every aspect of technology that we can bring to bear in terms of sound baffles and similar instruments to minimize that kind of impact.
And I'll take a shot at speaking nurse here, since I'm the nurse at the table. I think we are very concerned about patients and their experience. We are today, and we will continue to be in the future. I mean, I have to thank Kathleen for speaking out, for being our patient here. That is so important for your voice, and thank you. I mean, they are at the forefront of what we're doing. So when we talk about not disturbing people, probably patients, there's probably one stakeholder that we forgot to explicitly mention. But please don't for a second think we're not thinking about the patients who will be here front and center with their families as we're going through construction as well. Jason did such a good job of explaining the mitigation on all different levels. There's things I didn't even know that they did that they can do to engineer to make sure that this is safe and mitigates any noise. But we are thinking about patients.
Okay, thank you. Just one thing about construction and construction noise. One of the perceived neighborhood problems, certainly over all of my time on the community board, has been after hours and Saturday work. And excuse me, I think it's construction is noisy, construction is dirty, and over the course of 5 years, if it seems very much like going on 24/7, 365, I think everyone will be even more upset than they will be if, in fact, you try very hard not to look for after hours or weekend permits, or somehow balance those that are necessary with perhaps less weekday work. Anyway, that's an observation. Go ahead if you want to.
Jason or Commodore, start.
Yeah. Well, we certainly don't plan on doing construction 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I personally don't. I do appreciate the sensitivity around noise on off hours. And it is a concern that we really take to the heart. Really, we try to focus the weekend and the after hours work on things that can't happen during the week. It's not like our preference is to do things during normal work hours. It's more cost effective, and for a lot of reasons, that's generally our preference. Usually, when we're straying into after hours, it's out of necessity. I will also say we will obviously coordinate with the Department of Buildings, and we really can only do the work that we're allowed to do by the city. And considering the residences across the street, I'm sure they'll have something to say about when we can do the work. But it's generally not our preference to work in those areas. It's usually out of necessity or requirement.
Thank you. I think we all understand that, and I think you have more faith in the Department of Buildings than most of the people in Community Board 8. But next, we'll move to Community Board members, and Alita is first up.
Thank you. I have quite a lot of questions. The first thing on after hours variances that Anthony just raised, the DOB came to a zoning meeting several years ago and talked about its rules with respect to those variances, which is basically developers can get them just by asking for it. And it's only when the community complains that the DOB steps in or asks community boards to have a look at it. And even then, they don't always do that. So I guess maybe if I'm putting words in your mouth, Anthony, I'm sorry. Maybe what we're saying is please don't ask for those after hours variances, especially because it is a burden on the community and because the DOB does routinely grant them. On demolition, is there asbestos or lead paint in the building that's there now? And how will you deal with potentially hazardous dust or other materials? Then I have a question on whether you anticipate getting construction materials from China or whether they are will be domestically produced. What are your hours for construction? Will there be, you need to have quite a lot of street lighting. We've heard horrible examples of muggings in front of the Extel site on First Avenue between 79th and 80th. So I'd like to hear about your lighting plan at some point to ensure that the street is well lit even during evening and darker hours. You said, will the labor be union during construction? What do the drivers do if they can't get a parking appointment? Do you have an engineer looking at sinkholes because of the potential for sinkholes? Because there have been some on the Esplanade and they seem to be clustering around 70th, maybe 71st. There's one on 67th Street. Maybe it's something that you want to have an engineer look at before there's some horrible accident. I would suggest strongly that there be some kind of something like a dispute resolution board, which I'm sure Turner is quite familiar with, but for neighborhood complaints to really evidence an interest in having a partnership so that if there are complaints, there's a way of resolving them, not just through a phone call, but a real mechanism where people sit down with neighbors or the community board and try to work it out. I imagine you'd have something like a dispute resolution board for this project, but something involving the neighbors might make it really look like you're interested in having a partnership, and I understand the need and I fully support Sloan Kettering and the terrific work that you do. But when you say that you want a partnership, we're not I'm a little skeptical because of housing and the loss of housing. And you know how seriously Community Board A takes the lack of housing in our community. So the fact that I don't think sufficiently or adequately address the loss of housing by the demolition of that building that currently does house people and moving people to Queens. You talked about Roosevelt Island, but it doesn't really seem like an adequate response. So I'm a little bit skeptical about the partnership you talked about with the community for something else. I'd also ask, because I'm chair of the art committee, if you would agree that there could be artwork on the construction fence. We could work with PS 183, the elementary school, and have kids do something that would certainly cheer up that area. And if you think parking is bad now, once congestion pricing starts, if it does start, it could be much, much more of a nightmare. Not necessarily for your garage, but just for traffic in the neighborhood. And then finally, it seems that we're losing an awful lot of, well, some green space, and there certainly is not enough in the community. So maybe you could consider doing something like a park on the roof with access to be figured out, because the community really, really needs our trees and our bushes and our plants. And I'm also wondering how, and maybe you took this up in a week where I couldn't attend, but how this building or the construction will coordinate with the city's efforts to make New York carbon free. So that one you don't have to answer, it's an environmental one, but I'm just wondering about all of the other points I made. And thank you for your patience and thank you for your presentation and for everyone, including the construction and your attorney, being here this evening.
So I tried to write them down. I think Amador is writing them down. Jason, do you want to start with the asbestos and lead and where we purchase our construction materials?
Sure. So in terms of abatement, there are currently investigations going on in the building. There is some asbestos that was found in the interior of the building. The requirement for removing asbestos is to set up containment, remove it, have it completely contained on trucks and leave the site. And it is our intention for that to happen before the building is it's required for that to happen before the building is actually demolition. So all of that abatement is going to be happening within an enclosed building, based on the current reports we see with the asbestos being inside of the building. As we investigate and find out all of the extent of where there's hazardous material, we'll have to address it as we find it. But we've just started those investigations, and that's currently the intent.
Hey, Jason.
Yes.
I just want to restate this so it's really, really clear. Demolition of the building will not start until the abatement is complete.
Right.
There will not be an opportunity for the building to be demolished and have any of the hazardous material become pulverized and become airborne. That is not an option. That will, and we will assure you right now that the building will be clean before it comes down. And I know I'm probably being repetitive, but I can't overstate the importance of that. It's not acceptable. Go ahead, Jason, sorry.
Yeah, thank you for underlining that. Material locations, it's really early in the process. So it's the material itself has not been selected, let alone where it comes from. But the team has talked internally about a strong preference towards getting material from the United States, where it's available. So that's going to be our focus, outside of obviously supporting the local economy and a lot of other reasons to buy materials from the United States. It's also beneficial for us to have it close by, easier to make sure that it gets to the site on time. So we do have a strong preference to buying material locally. I'm going to do my best to capture all of your questions. I wrote down as many as I can. Hopefully I could just keep going through if that's all right. Completely agree and love the point about lighting. 100%. We intend to have tall scaffolding with bright lighting underneath it so that it feels safe to walk under the scaffolding at night. That's a priority. Love the idea about engaging with the school for artwork of the building. Obviously, that needs to be further developed, but we always look for opportunities when we're in a neighborhood to engage with schools. I mean, I've done that on a couple of different projects that I've been on. I'm excited. I wanted to be an engineer from when I was a kid. I am one now, and I'm happy to share what that means to kids. So we love the opportunity to engage with the schools. I'm trying to make sure I capture all of them.
The engineering assessment on sinkholes.
Engineering assessment on sinkholes. So there is a geotechnical engineer that's part of the broader team, as part of the design team. We also are required to identify and evaluate the weights of trucks before they're coming to the site. But it's a great point, and we'll be sure to share that information with the geotechnical engineer and understand the risks associated with that when making deliveries. Let me see, I think.
Resolution board.
And then the dispute resolution board, that's essentially the task force that we talked about earlier. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to, be in front of the disputes, be accountable to the disputes, explain the resolutions, and collaborate with you on what the resolutions are. I think whatever ends up being disputed and the ultimate resolution is only going to be better with the feedback from the community itself. So that's going to be an important part of doing a good job at resolving issues. So I'm fully on board with us communicating and working together to make sure that it's the best experience for the community. And glad to hear that that's your expectation of us throughout the construction process.
Ida, let me give you an example of how the construction working group worked to resolve disputes. On Coke, there was a dispute about the orange barriers on a lane closing. One of the neighbors felt that they were too far into the street and the like. DOT was not being responsive in terms of their complaints to DOT. I should have added that all the elected officials send a representative to the construction working group. The borough president literally dragged a DOT representative to the next month's construction working group meeting, and that situation was resolved on the spot. We expect that to happen, and I think that's a pretty telling example of dispute resolution through the use of the elected officials who will be regular participants in this process. So hopefully, it doesn't get to that. But at the end of the day, if an agency, if we can't affect change because we need an agency, we hope that this group will be able to provide the lubricant that we need to get that thing resolved for everybody's sake.
And the one more question I didn't address was the after hours. I know it was brought up earlier. I just want to express our preference not to work. Like our preference is to work during normal hours. It's more cost effective. In terms of me, I'm usually there. If we're working on this hour, oftentimes I would be there. So my preference is to keep work within normal work hours, but sometimes restrictions, coordination, it's usually through necessity that we push things into after work hours. But we're going to look to maximize keeping work within the normal work hours established by the DOP.
Yeah.
I would touch on a few other things. So there was a question on union labor. So MSK has a long history of using union labor on our projects, and that will continue on this project as well. So we intend to use union labor for that. There was the issue about green space. So it's an area of emphasis for the design team. So we're looking for ways where we can maximize that. In one of the earlier community board meetings, there was a request for us to consider even providing some green spaces around existing buildings around Memorial, particularly on First Avenue. So those are things that we're exploring to see how best we can maximize that, and that'll continue.
We do have a parks committee if you really want to have a partnership with the community board.
Sure, please.
Minimizing our carbon.
The low carbon footprint.
Housing. So I think I'll do the housing. So on housing, again, I understand the concern. We currently, as I've mentioned before, all of the residents in those two buildings that we're taking down are MSK affiliated. They're not from the neighborhood. All of the 300 that they're coming out, we're putting them and relocating them in existing MSK properties, one of which is being built in Roosevelt Island as we speak. We have existing capacity in our portfolio to absorb everybody. So every single person that currently resides in those two properties are going to be relocated within existing MSK properties. So we're not pushing them off to the community.
And maybe put a sort of better clearer perspective. Virtually all the residents of that building are here for training and education. These are not long-term residents of Community Board 8. These are fellows, graduate students, not only at Memorial, but actually about 20% of them are from Cornell. And they're here for 1 year, 2 years, as much as 3 or 4. And then they generally go somewhere else to take academic jobs or research jobs or clinical jobs. And so these are sort of our responsibility to provide market rate housing and keep them in the neighborhood. Many of them will be able to work at Roosevelt Island. It's not, as Laura can tell you, it's not inconvenient. And for many of them, those who do laboratory research, they don't need to get there the way a physician might need to be available immediately. So we think that this will not substantially change the housing capacity of the Community Board 8 and shouldn't have a big impact on the housing situation.
And I appreciate your answers for the housing. It's not just providing housing for people who are not earning salaries, let's say, of the doctors, but it's also of the fullness of a community when people of all different economic levels live in it. And by moving people who may be at a lower income level because they're students or fellows out of the community, it does have an impact on the nature of the businesses and an intermixing of people. But that's another issue, and I don't want to take up time. I'm happy to go to Julie Menon and say that you've agreed to the artwork on construction fences because she coordinated with someone else, and I'm working with her on trying to do that around the community. And for the dispute resolution board, I'm thinking of immediate or close to immediate resolutions of disputes. Maybe some of them are below the radar of the kinds of things a dispute resolution board in construction normally deals with, which are of the moment disputes between a subcontractor, let's say, and the general. But for ways of working with the community and having buy-in from the community and making you a better neighbor in the community outside of the medical realm, that could be really effective. I don't want to take up more of your time and more of the community board and the public's time. I really appreciate your answers, except that, and maybe Judy Schneider will deal with this, which is the congestion pricing potential impact on traffic in the community. And that is something that I would urge you to really look at. The city downplays the impact of congestion pricing, but 60th Street is the border, and that could very well extend up to where you are. We anticipate huge amounts of problems from park in the area and then not have to pay a potential $23 fee to go down there. So I know you don't have answers. No one has answers to that, but just to have that in your planning, that there may well be a huge increase of trucks and delivery guys and cars circling around. And so when you are planning your routes and planning the impact on corridors going up to the hospital, the other hospitals in the neighborhood, that you consider all of that. I'll stop now. Again, I really appreciate your time and your willingness to work with the community board and the community to make it a much more, well, let's just say a hopefully smoother process. Thank you, guys. And that's non-gender based.
Thank you, Alita. I think just two things before I call on Judy. One is the congestion pricing. If in fact the inbound is not tolled, then there will be a tremendous number of cars coming in and disgorging within 5 blocks or so of the site. And I think it is something that you all have to look at and perhaps even be overconscious of. And there was one other effect of the loss of housing, which that Alita didn't mention, and that is that we are replacing residents who shop and live in the neighborhood with patients who are in the hospital. And so that there will be an effect of that loss of 300 people on local businesses. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that, even if they can shift their purchasing to Roosevelt Island. Okay, Judy.
Thank you, Anthony. I'll do what Alita did. I have a whole list of things. Firstly, you have both your parks co-chairs here tonight at this meeting. I'm one, and Felice Farber, who's the co-chair of this meeting, is the other park co-chair. So let's start out with the green space, as you mentioned. I mentioned it at the last meeting. As many buildings as you have here in the area, if you can put greenery in front of them, if not on them, if not rooftop reset, the community would really, really like that. I think I spoke about the Schwartz building in specifics because we had it and we lost it on First Avenue. But whatever you can do as far as greenery is concerned, that would be
We've
great.
noted the Schwartz building, and I think that is
Okay, it's really lacking. Congestion pricing, I brought up a resolution at the meeting this month that passed the board by one vote, but it passed, that they should toll the upper level of the 59th Street Bridge. X comes off at 62nd and 63rd, because otherwise we're going to have a huge traffic problem, even bigger than we have now. And we've lost 2 garages to schools here in the 60s, and we keep losing more. I urge you people at the hospital, everybody at this meeting, please contact your state elected officials, your assembly people, your senator, and please tell them to, if they can, speak to that MTA task force that's working on congestion pricing, because it's not going to work well for us. Another hat that I wear is the East 60s Neighborhood Association hat. So in the beginning, when you were talking about stakeholders and you kept referring to 183, which is one of our members, that's terrific. They're a great school, but please include in your stakeholders the apartment buildings in the surrounding area. We have a number of them. I'll be happy to talk to you off camera, who the presidents of the buildings are, and that they be included. And I'm assuming, as a positive from what Mr. Friedman said, that you will also continue with this building once you get to the point of starting your putting your demolition, construction, and whatever. Once you're finished with the community board, that you will start your monthly working group meetings. Is that, I'm assuming that's a given. If it's not, I wish somebody would please tell me. The other thing is, when will we get to know what this building and the bridge actually look like? When will we be seeing drawings of that? Traffic. I have a lot of questions. Traffic, staging. Did I understand you correctly that you're staging on York Avenue? Will you be having traffic managers? If you haven't considered it, please make it a positive that you hire traffic managers for this project, because otherwise it just won't go smoothly. So what streets are you staging on? Then you had a slide up in the very beginning after stakeholders that talked about channel rock to separate before chopping. I didn't know what that sentence meant, and if somebody could explain that, that would be great. And then getting back to the street, this is a little different. I think Alita brought it up. I think there's supposed to be an entrance to the hospital on York Avenue, yet you have, no? Okay, you're shaking your head no, so then I'm wrong. So
I think specifically to discourage patients from being dropped off on York Avenue. The entrances to the are at the two ends on 67th and 66th, and the drive actually internal to the site underneath. There's two lanes.
There's a drive-through. Yeah, I
Yes.
understood that about the drive-through. So okay, so then I was wrong about that.
But even the entrance to the hopefully the green space will go out towards York Avenue, and even to walk in from the sidewalk, you'll do it from 66th or 67th. There won't be an entrance into the building directly from York.
Okay, can I make a suggestion? Hospital for Special Surgery has done this on 70th Street because of the drive exit and all the problems. Also, they have construction now. But I think you need to have a permanent 1 or 2 people at 66 and 67 on the street. And maybe convince them they shouldn't be dropping the patients off there. They should go into the drive-through to drop off the patients. But even if they do that, you need someone there to kind of handle the traffic to keep it flowing. And I know HSS does that, and it makes a huge difference. So those are all my traffic and transportation question. And I think that's it for me. I think I covered all my questions. Thank you for holding these working groups.
Jason, do you want to take the traffic managers and the staging and the rock chopping questions?
Take all of those. First, thank you for emphasizing the apartments across the street as one of the stakeholders. We agree with you, and we're in alignment with that. The monthly working group meetings, you asked whether that would start. We're 100% in alignment with that starting as soon as possible. So we want to make sure that we are going to be engaged with that. In terms of staging on York Ave, we are focused on having the major entrance and exit to the construction site be from York Ave and minimizing the amount of trucks going down 66th and 67th Street. And to the extent possible, bringing those into the construction site. That is the general intent. And in terms of staging, we want to plan delivery so that we're able to, we're scheduling the amount of as many deliveries as we can absorb into the site. So we're trying our best to keep it in the site, but yes, entrance and exit for most vehicles will be on York Ave. The channeling question, so when we're doing the rock excavation, one of the approaches to minimizing that vibration or propagation from leaving the construction site is to first channel and create a separation in the rock between the rock that we're digging in the site to the streets and everything around the site, almost creating an island within it so that when you're chopping, it doesn't propagate outwards. That was referring to that technique of trying to keep that vibration and propagation within the site. So creating that channel and that air gap between the rock inside the site and the street outside helps to minimize the propagation outside of the site. Hopefully that explains.
With regard to, we did at one of the previous meetings show some provisional drawings. I think it's rather early in the process, but I can't remember which meeting that was at.
That would have been the architectural and the zoning presentation, because when our ULIP application goes in for certification, which is the application that you will then get as a community board to pass a resolution on, there will be illustrative elevations showing the proposed architectural design. You've seen already the envelope, you've seen the massing envelope, and you've seen the building massing tonight, where at the ground level, the building pinches in on both 66th and 67th Street to create these open areas. Admittedly, there's building overhead, but these areas are going to be significantly planted and landscaped, and those will all be part of the drawings that when we get to that part of the process, you will be reviewing at land use when the application is certified.
Okay, thank you very much. Those were my questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Judy. And now we have Michelle Birnbaum.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you very much to the MSK team. Appreciate your being here and at all the other meetings. I know we haven't seen, I have a couple of things. I know we haven't seen the design of the building yet, but it struck me as you were presenting the overhead walkway, just what would be those materials, the size, the height, how far is it from the schoolyard, and have you done any shadow studies? Can you just give me a little brief overview of that to start?
Yes, Michelle, good evening. The way a building is approved at city planning for a large scale like this, we're not getting a specific building approved. We're getting an envelope approved in which the building can be built. So at the moment, you see a very firm street to street box, but within that box, there will be an architecturally significant building by Foster and Partners, who have a pretty good track record for some pretty spectacular buildings, around the world. Because we're getting the envelope approved, city planning isn't looking for all of the architectural design work and all of that at this time. That will come later on. The community board will still see what we have when we go through Euler, but that work is still underway. What I can tell you about the maximum envelope is that it is 594 feet maximum to the top. That includes the mechanical levels, which are significant in every hospital. That's the equivalent of several stories right there. And that box will top out at a maximum of 594. Is that correct? Is it 594? I may be a single digit off here or there. But the building itself will end up having setbacks and some form of mechanical systems that are sculpted. But we're not going to have that for you for a while because that's not part of the ULURP application at this stage. The EIS, the draft environmental impact statement, will study the impact of this maximum box that we're going to be allowed to build within. City planning vernacular, it's called the sweater. We have to stay within the sweater. That there will be a shadow analysis that will be part of the draft, which will also be reviewed by the community board during ULURP. I know it's not complete yet because those chapters haven't even been submitted to city planning. That's one of the disadvantages of coming to you early. We come to you with a lot of blanks in the normal process. But when you see this project again coming through ULURP, that chapter will be published and in front of you with all of the shadow diagrams that are completed under the city's secret handbook. So that's the best I can say to you now.
That's fine.
Keep an eye on us. Keep posted, and all of that will become part of the ULURP submission.
That's fine. But let me just follow up. When you talk about the envelope, that doesn't include the bridge. So the bridge is a separate entity and be considered separately.
The bridge is not approved by city planning. It's approved by DOT. But everybody wants to do this as one project because the bridge is so important to the entire project for all of the program reasons you've heard tonight. But yes, the bridge itself is a DOT responsibility. The zoning actions that establish this envelope are at city planning.
Okay, let me just say this. As this project goes forward and eventually will end up at city planning, what do you see as your biggest concern about getting this project approved as presented?
I think every one of us has probably a different answer to that question. I'll just state mine, and that is that the community understand how important this project is and how vital MSK views community engagement and working with you to do the best that we can I'm sure there will be differences. I'm sure there will be opposition in some places. But if we can lay the groundwork, the foundation for you understanding just how critical this building is on a number of fronts, that's my highest aspiration. I know that Dr. Drebin can speak for MSK as a whole in terms of its role in
Yeah, those are programmatic things and needs and all that, but I mean in terms of the project, of the scope of the project. What's your biggest concern with city planning?
The biggest concern that I have at city planning is that, and with the general community approach to this, is that people understand that a great deal of the decision making about MSK's campus and this site was actually considered and decided upon in 20 years ago, when we did the large scale that established the amount of floor area that would one day be utilized for what was in 2001 called the replacement hospital. It was fully addressed in that application. It was modeled in the EIS. We couldn't go forward with it. We're here to continue that discussion now. The very, very unique thing about this that I hope city planning will take into account, and thus far they have, is that, yes, the preliminary decision-making, the policies about having a hospital adjacent, the need for a hospital building adjacent to the MSK campus of this general size was addressed 22 years ago. And my hope is that piece of the public policy machinery will always understand that's a principal part of the application that we're bringing forward. This is not something that was put together in the last couple of years. It's a project over the entire large scale that is only 10 FAR. There are no bonuses being requested. It's 100% hospital related uses, and in our case in particular, it's acute inpatient uses. There are no laboratories for private use. There's no condos. There's nothing else here but MSK's mission on the line. And we've been talking about it for 21 years. Unfortunately, that's a long period of time, and the personnel change and people on the community board change. But I know there are some people on this community board who will remember all of those discussions.
Okay, I understand that. And of course, you are a very, very sympathetic applicant, and all of us respect your mission, revere your mission, and want to support your mission. But I was talking, and I won't belabor it, but just to clarify, I was talking about specifically the height and bulk of the building. I wondered if you had any anticipation about what kind of feedback you might get. And my other question, which I had asked you before, is given that concern with what feedback you might get, what is your mitigation? You did allude to me in the past that you do have a mitigation plan if this didn't go through as proposed. I imagine you are not willing to share that at the moment, but at some point, I would like to hear it. Let me also say about congestion pricing, I was going to address that as well. First of all, had I been at that meeting the other night, the vote would not have passed about tolling the upper part of the bridge. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there. What I would like to ask of MSK and all of the hospitals, although it does not necessarily reflect the community board's concern, but my own, is that wherever you see possible, I would object to the congestion pricing scheme as presented. It is going to affect you terribly. It's going to affect our community very negatively, and it is a very big problem. And frankly, it's going to end up right in your lap. The borderline is 60th Street. There'll be a big gantry there. There will be a gantry at every exit of not only the East River Drive, but West Side Highway, up and down. There'll be, which will be a real blight. So there will be concerns right in the hospital corridor, which if you're not thinking about now, you really will have to. But anyway, I thank you for being here. I'm very interested in hearing about your alternative plan that will satisfy your programmatic needs should the height and bulk of your current presentation face some hurdles along the way. In the meantime, I thank you very much for being here.
Michelle, thank you. And I can only say our goal in doing this pavilion was not to make a really tall building to deliver healthcare and do surgery. Our goal was to take care of the number of patients we anticipate we're going to need to take care of in the next 10, 20, 30 years and have a building that will be there for 100 as we face all the changes in hospitals and healthcare that need to happen. And so in doing that, we tried to estimate the number of operating rooms we need, which was 28. We tried to estimate the number of patient beds, which was 200. If I could have 400, I would love it. We can't. We recognize we have capacity limits, but this is enough for us to meet the needs of the next several decades in terms of the growth of cancer patients in our community and in our nation. And so it's, you ask what my greatest fear is that we would have to do what you've suggested, which is to modify the plan to a lesser plan, because then we will not be able to care for the number of patients who are going to need our care. And one of the great things about being at Memorial is everyone from, Christine, who empties my trash at night, to the president of the hospital, knows that we're all about giving the best cancer care in the world today and even better care for tomorrow through our research. And everything that's in the Pavilion plan is to allow us to continue that. If we have to do less than that, we will be unable to fulfill our mission to the extent we hope we can.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, guys. Marco is next.
Thank you, MSK, for coming tonight. I think it's always a pleasure to see you, especially the counselor that's coming frequently right here, so many times, the master of the corridor of the hospital. Well, I would like to ask a question. This is the first question to you, doctor. I believe that your service that you provide is one of the best in the world. I don't have no doubt, and I'm not questioning that part. On the contrary, I say thank you to provide excellent service for those people in need. And I appreciate deeply that. So this is for Kathleen, this is for Mrs. Brown, that it has been your patient, and I think you have an excellent reputation all around the world, no doubt. Why do you put so much announcement on the TV for your service if you are having an excellent reputation? You want to increase more population of the people? You want to compete with your other hospital that you offer your own this service?
So you're asking why we have a marketing campaign and we try to let people know about us. So, it has really, our mission is to give great cancer care. Part of it is to let people know that if they come here for cancer care, they're going to get the best cancer care. And I'm not going to show you the data, but I can show you that your chance of being alive, whether you have early stage cancer or late stage cancer, is somewhere between 10 and 35% better, depending on the type of cancer and the stage, if you're treated here than if you're treated elsewhere. And we feel that that's part of our mission. So, I think to be honest, there's a feeling that we don't, in the marketing battles, we keep one hand behind our back. If you notice the billboards, the advertisements, I would say we're not as frequent as some other national and local cancer centers.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I never hear anything wrong about your hospital. Definitely, you provide an excellent quality of service. No doubts about that. But the only thing that caught my attention is, since you have such a big reputation, why marketing? You don't need to market. Well, okay, thank you. You answered the question.
We're a nonprofit hospital, and we give a lot of free care. We moved most of our resources into research to try to do even better care. But my father was a hospital CFO, and he used to, for a major nonprofit in the Midwest, and he used to say, profit is not a four-letter word. Loss is a four-letter word. And if patients don't come to the hospital business suffers.
Yeah, well, somebody else told me what is the best business you can do in this country is basically something that never is gonna fail is either to provide medical service or to provide a funeral service. Because when you reach that level, you have to, there is no other way. Okay, thank you so much, Doctor, for your question. That's it. I finished with you. And I would like to ask a question. So I would like to ask a question, the structural engineer. That's called me my attention. I think, first of all, somebody asked you, I think Salida asked you the sinkholes. You look, you don't have sinkholes in our communities. You have a bedrock. You know that better than me because you have been working and doing excavations. But the question is to you is not that's the problem. The problem is not even the problem, not even the sewer system. The biggest problem is these pipes, the water pipes that provide to the service is aging. And is more than 100 years in some cases. And that, after the aging, that's the problem. So probably the vibration may break and create the sinkhole. And that is the biggest concern. You as a structural engineer, you know very well that part. Do you?
First, I want to say I'm not a structural engineer. I'm a construction manager, so we're the construction company. We're not the structural engineer. The constructional engineer for the project and the geotechnical engineer for the project, which is more appropriate for your question, are not here right now. But what I did allude towards, and I appreciate your concerns about vibration propagating through, outside of the site, which is what you're talking about, vibration impacting utilities outside of the site. That's why we brought up the concept of channeling to minimize that vibration from leaving the site and keeping it in the construction site. So understood, and I appreciate your point.
Yeah, the point is this infrastructure it was put more than 100 years, and that's it. It's you don't need to be even a structural engineer. You know what makes gonna happen. It's not you. It's because these pipes is already too old. It's already too time to replace, and then the minimum vibration they can break, and that's what basically the point. Now, you mentioned that you are preparing for construction. Is that correct? Now you are the contractor to do the construction. So in order to do the construction, first of all, let's go establish one point. Construction is a mess. So I'm not going to ask questions about construction because I respect you. It is whatever you do always will be wrong because the community never like you. And as I understand that part perfectly. So no questions about that. My question is to you, how are you going to plan to build something if you don't know what is the cladding of the building? You don't know. I think you are fully aware that I think I saw your drawings in the page 21. Clearly they showed glass and they showed, I think, steel. And you know very well, that is basically what is called thermal breach. And that's what it called less resistant to the loss of the energy, air leakage. All of these contribute to increase the loads inside of the building operation, and the more energy that you provide, that you used, the more carbon emissions you issue, and the carbon emission is part of the Euler process, and the Euler process is clearly established even the limits of the carbon emissions. Not only that, now the city planner is establishing 8 tons per square feet that you can produce your building inside of the environment. So how you gonna calculate, how you gonna resolve this issue, how you gonna prepare for construction if you don't have this kind of information?
So I would say that when it comes to the team that we put together to really help MSK get to pretty much continuing what we do as far as really being a steward of energy efficiency in the way we manage our buildings, Marco, we totally agree and we understand how important it is to really make sure you have the right team together to really understand the complexities of these materials and how they come together to really provide what you need as an organization. So during our process, we went out to industry leaders of curtain wall consulting, architectural design, MEP engineering, to really pull those things together. And we feel the team complement that we put together between Heinches, who is world-renowned as far as curtain wall consulting, Foster and Partners, Canon Design, and also JB&B is our mechanical engineer, electrical and plumbing engineer. We feel we have the right complement of team that's going to help us move forward into the future and really reach our goals as far as the way we operate as being energy efficient, very much conscious of sustainability as an organization.
And I would just add, Marco, your point about that the contractors need that information to build, you are 100% right. It's one of the limitations of us coming so premature in this process. We haven't gotten to that point in terms that we've outlined and the materials. We're just not at that stage of the design process. They're still in the conceptual design phase. At some point, the design will catch up and we will have answers for that. It's just, it's a byproduct of we're coming to you so early. We just don't have those answers resolved yet.
Well, I'm going to tell you one thing. I'm going to help you. You know that at the time when you
I need help.
I'm going to give you some help. You know, at the time when you start building, it will be implement DOB, the new regulations. And the new regulations will be, if you're not complying with the 2030 and 2050 regulations, you don't have CO. You don't have CO. That means the doctor cannot operate over there. The doctor cannot do anything. It means if you don't have the CO, so basically you don't have facility, regardless if it's finished, regardless if they have the whatever facility that you build. And you must be in compliance with that. And that is an advice to you. And that is what I'm pushing in that direction. And I'm pushing also because you issue carbon emissions to the environment. And if the designer do the right thing, if it's a sustainable design, you don't have to be worried about what I'm asking. Right there, I'm hearing that courting wall is right away. I'm telling you, if you do that, you increase carbon emissions. You make the building more expensive. The doctor can have more expenses in energy, and the more energy you spend and the poor quality of the air, the less quality the patient they have to have inside of the building. And that is the point. This is affecting to everybody. It's affecting the community, it's affecting the doctor to perform properly, that needs a good quality of air inside of this facility. It impacts the neighborhood, and the neighborhood is going to be impacted with this kind of unfair carbon emissions. And that is my goal. I mean, I had to be fair with everybody. I mean, I'm not blame you. What I'm trying to say is do the right thing at the beginning. And when you do the right thing at the beginning, it will be better for everybody. And everybody can tolerate the huge building that you have. Now, with respect to the gentleman that said that they need a collaboration in order to reach an agreement or to find a solution for transportation. How do you think that we're gonna find a solutions right now if there are people that have fist fighting in the street? You want the community to go outside right now? This is what the residents of the area is saying. They are fist fight over there. You want now the community to go over there in the middle of that and say don't fight? And now you are planning to bring more traffic in the area, and you said don't fight. And now not only that, the congestion pricing, they will throw all the traffic to your area. So look, I mean, I've tried to be fair. My question that is very straightforward and fair for you. I'm not trying to undermine your project. What I'm trying to say is, look, two things. In the environment, which is part of the environmental report, and traffic, which is environmental report. There are two elements that basically myself, I feel completely without no information about that. And how do you expect the community to make a final decision? And I think that is completely unfair for us, that you are not coming prepared to explain and show it to us, that part. And thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Next, we have Mrs. Brown.
Thank you, Anthony. Good evening, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to say to MSK personnel, I appreciate and respect, support your vision. As a current patient at MSK, you have done wonders for the community. I just want to caution you that look at 530 74th Street, the Koch Center, and look at the congestion traffic that flows in and out, because that street at that point is very narrow and cars tend to double park, and there's not much ease getting it in and out of the Koch Center. As far as the building is concerned, it's a LEED building, and I find it very efficient. If there's a way to improve that for the new facility, please do, but study the traffic patterns, the parking patterns at East 74th Street, and make sure that it's not does not have a problem at 66 and 67. And my other concern is that I would appreciate if you would expand your integrated health and well-being and focus on somatic exercises and teach everyone how to regulate their nervous system. Then we won't be having the fights Marco just addressed with the neighbors. And perhaps we may not need those additional 200 beds. So, and thank you very much. And if I can help in any way, please reach out to me, because you're doing a fine job and I'm here because of the work that you are doing. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And we're certainly grateful for your kind comments, and we're pleased that you're having a good response to treatment, and that we've been successful. That's our hope for everyone. And we do it better every year than the year before, but we still have work to do. But thank you for those comments, and we will take them to heart.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mrs. Brown. We have one member of the public that I think, if they're brief, and then we'll go back to Alita. Jochen Baber.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you, Anthony, and thank you to the team from MSK. Full disclosure, I do work at MSK for about 4 years now, and I live on 66th Street for about a year and a half, right across from the public school. And it just occurred to me during the listening to everyone that it's really very difficult when someone with a lot of perceived power comes in and then proposes a plan where a lot of people may feel that they're not well equipped to at some point later step in. And so one of the general questions I had is, would MSK be willing to, for instance, allow some ways of putting their feet to the fire going forward? For instance, in the building where I live, the Hardenbrook House, MSK owns several units, and I could imagine that, for instance, if a few executives were to say, hey, when those units become available next time someone moves out, we have someone from the executive team move into the neighborhood and actually be exposed to some of the shenanigans that may be happening over the next 5 to 10 years, that people in the community feel actually, yeah, you know, those people are willing to say, we trust the process in place to actually be exposed to that. And I'm just trying to think out of the box, what could provide the community with a little more trust that people are really kind of.
I think many of our leaders, including me, live in the community. So I think Lisa DeAngelis, our chief physician executive, was at one of our earlier calls. She's lived in the zone and raised her children here, has lived here for 30 or 40 years. And I think Many, I can't tell you the
Nursing
fraction,
leaders.
but nursing leaders, administrative leaders, physician leaders live walking distance to the hospital.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jochen. Alida, and then obviously my co-chair, Felice.
Thank you. I'll be brief because this doesn't really touch on construction so much. But since you have expressed interest in partnerships, and because, as Anthony pointed out, with the loss from the neighborhood of the people being displaced by this building, small businesses are likely to be affected. If you would consider partnering with a small business committee of Community Board 8, which I co-chair, and working and figuring out how the hospital could support small businesses in the community. I have a lot of ideas because I talked to New York Presbyterian about this years ago before the pandemic, but I think that you're a force in the community and that could be something worthwhile if you are interested. My other point is that, my gosh, what is my other point? I totally lost it, how embarrassing and unbecoming. So you know what, let's Felice go, and then if you could come back to me, Anthony, because it has to do, oh, no, I remember, I'm sorry, I remember. We're so concerned about the increase in cancer rates. You obviously have a lot of ideas about health and about what might precipitate all of this increase in cancer. I talked to someone doing research at New York Presbyterian years ago who told me, for instance, that sugar has a huge impact because cancer cells feed on sugar, and reducing sugar in our diets is really essential. If the city doesn't talk to you about some of its decisions, which the community is concerned about, not everybody, but some of us are concerned about some decisions, I would suggest you wriggle, you push, you get in there and become an advisor to the city on the decisions being made that might have a real impact on that aspect of our health. And that's it. I'm done. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Alida.
So I guess now I'll chime in as cleanup crew. Great presentation tonight. I really appreciate your openness. I'm gonna run through questions, and if you want me to repeat anything or go slower, let me know. We talked a lot about the construction plans and what you were doing to mitigate a lot of impacts, but the one thing that I didn't hear a discussion about is rats. And we know that when we do engage in construction activities, we unfortunately disturb rat nests in the city of New York. So I'm curious as to what you're doing, and I guess what is called vector control. Really happy to hear the talk about greenery, and I just want to emphasize doing something about planting more greenery and making sure there's green space. I also really liked Alida's idea of doing something about the artwork around the scaffold on the construction fencing that was done, I believe, on 3rd Avenue as part of the Northwell Health project over there, and I think it really made a difference on the view of the community. And so I would encourage you to really take that up and partner with the nearby school on that. You talked about coordination with PS 183. I'd like to know a little bit more about, or I guess really emphasize partnering with the school and all the schools in the Julia Richmond complex as well about construction activities and minimizing the noisiest activities when it would have the biggest impact on the students there, whether it's test taking time or whatever is going on, or focusing, if you're doing blasting to break up rock, which I think is a good idea to minimize the constant pounding of pile drivers, doing that early in the morning before school starts, and then you could be working on debris removal during the day. But I just encourage you to partner with the school to figure out what those best hours of construction activity are to minimize the impacts on the schools. You talked about, the question was asked about the union work, and I have raised that before, and you said you have a long history of using union labor and you tend to use union labor on this job. I really hope that you do, and perhaps have a project labor, a PLA on the job, to make sure that you do use union labor and that it is a union project. You talked a lot initially about offsite fabrication. Oftentimes, offsite fabrication of elements tends to be non-union. So really want to emphasize the desire to have this be a union construction project, and to have a PLA. One of the things that can be done to minimize costs on the project, and a PLA would allows you to do this, is having some kind of alternative dispute resolution process. And I think Turner has some experience with ADR, and that might be something to explore on this project as a way of reducing costs. In terms of noise, I'm not to what extent you've thought about electric construction equipment. I know there are, for the noisiest activities, I don't believe the electric equipment is really meets the demands of the construction activities, but to the extent that you can, I would encourage the use of electric powered equipment. And then two other comments. I don't recall if you talked about how long the construction duration was. So I apologize if I missed that, but if you could let us know how long you think the project will take. And then finally, I live right across from the XL development on First Avenue. And one of the things that I've noticed, I guess when they were really focused on the foundation and doing debris removal, there was oftentimes a line of trucks on 79th Street waiting to head into the project and pick up. And just wondering how that would be managed on this project, since clearly there'll be a lot of debris removal from the project. And so I think that is all my questions and comments.
Jason and Amador, wanna?
I can start by answering a couple. I will do my best. My device failed, so I couldn't take notes while you were going, so I rely on my partners who had pen and paper, the good old fashioned ways to help me out. First, that was rats. Agree it's always an issue, not just in construction in New York City. Our focus will be, one, we'll hire a company to make sure that we are, evaluating opportunities to traps and all the things associated with rat mitigation. In addition to that, one of the biggest ways to combat rats on a construction site is through having a clean site, minimizing the organic matter on the site. There's a couple ways that we go about that. One, I just want to raise that outside of the sensitivity with rats, because we're building a hospital, there's a heightened concern about organic matter. The worst thing in the world would be some organic matter left in the corner somewhere in the building. We put a wall up, and that's an opportunity for mold and compromises patients in the future. So we've in the past hired consultants specifically to attack that. Some of the things we do on the construction site, outside of having the appropriate amount of union laborers to clean the site and make sure it's maintained clean, designating specific areas for the workers to eat lunch. Not only do we see that as a humane thing, they can sit at tables in a good area to have their lunch, but it also prevents food from being distributed throughout the site, and also keeps the the trope of what we've seen of construction workers eating the sandwich sitting on the floor outside of the construction site. We're keeping them in our site by providing good places for them to eat, and it also makes it easier for us to keep the site clean and make sure that we're minimizing the opportunities for rats. There was a construction schedule. We did touch on that briefly. I didn't apologize if I didn't clearly state it as we went through, but currently we're planning for the middle of next year to start construction, and we're showing to end sometime early 2030 is what we're showing for the construction schedule.
Idling of trucks.
Idling of trucks. Thank you everyone. It takes a village. So idling of trucks. It is currently, and I know I've seen that happen on construction sites. It's our plan to do our best to minimize that. The biggest combatant we have to that was one, expanding the site so that we can absorb trucks into the site to that extent possible, but also proper planning ahead of time so that we're only getting deliveries for the amount of trucks that we're able to handle. Construction is complicated, a lot goes on, but we would use planning to focus on minimizing the opportunities for that to happen.
Electrical equipment options.
And then electrical equipment, I'm glad you brought that up because that's something that's important to us. We push for electrical equipment in our preliminary plans. We would hope to have electric cranes to do the steel erection as an example. A lot of that is predicated on coordination with Con Edison and the power requirements that they're able to give us. But to the extent possible, we will push for electric equipment. You know, I'm a big proponent of that, so I appreciate you bringing that point up. There's a lot of benefits associated with it.
The communication plan with the schools. Covering that.
Yep, love that you brought up the communication plan with the school. We would want to have that engagement throughout all of the construction, and we understand that, you know, any plan that we come up with will only be made better through that communication. I know my Lend-Lease partners, my day-to-day partners at Lend-Lease, I know I'm specifically at Turner, had conversations with the school when they were doing mechanical equipment picks and fuel oil tank work in the campus themselves. I talked to them. The principal at the time had asked for things like an additional site safety person outside on the street, across the street from the school while it was happening. The Turner, the Lend-Lease team provided that there, and we would want to do similar things. They asked for additional barriers. That was all provided. And that's just an example of the plan being made better when we get input from the community, and obviously the school is a major part of that.
I think the remaining items that I heard was the commitment to union labor, which we agree with. That's our intent, is to use union labor for the project. The need for more green space, that obviously is a priority. We'll make sure that the design team continues to emphasize and find opportunities for that. And the artwork on the construction fences, that was heard loud and clear. I think that's most of the items.
Yes, thank you. And will you be negotiating a PLA, or are you just committing to use union labor?
We're not sure yet, Felice. Right now, at this point, we're committing to union labor, and we'll see how that process evolves.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Marco would like to have another bite of the apple. Go ahead, Marco.
Thank you, Anthony, again. About the rat mitigation, I think we don't need to ask you this kind of question, because DOV, they put a new law that they're gonna visit, and they're gonna be very strict in that part. So either you do it for the good of the project, or you will be penalized with DOV. We respect that the labor workers. Look, I prefer myself to use semi-industrial process, because the quicker you do, the sooner you finish the project. If you want just everything to finish, to do on site, it will take longer, and probably it will go beyond what you expect. It means doesn't have no sense, because I want to create labor job, I'm going to delay the construction process. I prefer myself that the sooner that you can finish, the better for the community. Thank you.
We agree.
Thank you, Marco. Okay, I think we have run out of comments, and we've certainly run longer than usual. Just very quickly, yes, Marco, very quickly. We are meeting again next week, at which time the task force, I think we're a task force, will attempt, hopefully we will succeed in formulating a resolution that we can bring to the full board. So if someone, I think Marco is, Michelle.
Thank you all, and move to adjourn.
And a second, I think Elizabeth's hand is still up and Marco's as well. So unless there is any overwhelming series of objections, which there are not, thanks so much, guys, and MSK. And we'll be back next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.